Hi everybody. So a good friend of mine recently asked me, why is it that sometimes our dear ones that crossed over don't give us any sign or don't communicate with us, and other times they do so really actively? And I just thought to make this video because I think many of us often wonder about that, and I've often wondered about that, and I asked, of course, my higher self why that is, and an interesting answer came that I wanted to share. It's because, of course, in the afterlife, or I like to call it the prime reality, because it's really like the reality where these 3D worlds originally came from, we are always there. We're always there with our loved ones, where we are always there as our greater selves, and we incarnate only partially. So when that part of us that is incarnated in a certain 3D world or on a certain 3D timeline gets back, it's just there with they are there with us. So sometimes it's not needed, or our greater self or higher self doesn't have the need maybe to send a signal to the self that is in incarnation. But it can happen, of course. It's sometimes also blocked by grief. So the more dear that person is, the harder it may be to connect at first, because we are grieving not only the loss of the beloved soul, but also the body form. And I find that the hardest, that we miss the physical form. And that's really hard, because the physical form is no longer active, it's no longer spirited. So sometimes it takes time, and sometimes it's just there's some kind of a blockage. And sometimes the higher or greater self is just having so much fun in those like broader dimensions that it maybe forgets to give a sign or communicate with that smaller 3D that is here, and wondering where the loved one, where the spirit is, and how they're doing. And but then there are times, when the spirit, when they're maybe not ready, that part of the spirit that incarnated isn't ready to fully reunite with its higher self or greater self, that it kind of hangs around with the dear one, waiting that they will go together, that these small parts of the greater soul will then just reunite together. And that's also a way. I know that some people are against it. Some people say like you should let them go. But for some people, and I know several people that this works for, that they are with that beloved, small soul waiting to reunite with their greater souls or their greater selves, their greater consciousness, because they're just so connected. So it doesn't always have to be parasitical for that person. It can be actually supportive. It can be they can become their guardian angel. In my experience with losing some dear ones prematurely, sometimes they hang around, sometimes they give messages, and sometimes it's harder because we are so limited by grief. For example, when my dearest dog Max, who was like an angel incarnation, very beautiful soul, when he crossed over, my grief really limited me from sensing him, and it took some time to sense him, to sense his spirit. And I reconnected with him then in a parallel incarnation in the future of the main earth, or the prime earth, or the main timeline, as I call it, but also with his higher or greater self in the 7th dimension, where he's like with the kind of angelic beings. And it was just the grief that really limited the connection. But yet, despite that, he gave me signs through, the typical one, electricity behaving strangely, lights flickering. Also on my phone, his picture would suddenly pop up without me touching anything, get really large, and then shrink again. And it just behaved on its own, kind of, that image. And then it just disappeared one day. And it's like he was telling me, this wasn't the full me. Forget about just that one dog that you've encountered in this incarnation. I am much more. And then he started to come a lot in dreams. I started to journey with him also during my inner journeying, as I call it. And he would visit me. Just suddenly I got the sense of that he's here, and my husband has the same. He comes a lot to us as a golden light from the 7th dimension where his greater self is. And then I had another experience with a very dear friend of mine that died prematurely and tragically, and her spirit kind of lingered for some time because of the trauma, and she gave us signs through, you know, things falling from the bookshelves. I heard her voice a lot in my mind, calling my name and calling me to help. Her husband, who crossed over at the same time, and her dog. So she was very much also about getting out of the lattice, what she called this matrix, the lattice or the grid. And she said she's so happy to go past that grid into the real reality. And thanks to her then and her messages, I was able to first begin to understand that we live in a simulation or a false reality, a false timeline. It's not the original, it's not the prime planet Earth. That is, you know, exists in parallel to our matrix or this matrix. But then I had another experience with my cat crossing over. He wanted to come back, and he stayed with me for a year, kind of telling me how he will reincarnate. So it was very interesting because I kept telepathic communication with him, and he also communicated through dreams and through telepathy, because we used to have this telepathic connection, so it was quite easy to, you know, stay in that communication. And he just, like, you know, from his, he said that he just remained in the 4th dimensional reality where time is flexible and you can work with it. So for him, you can work with it creatively. So for him, it was like maybe like a day of existence. And for us, it was a year before he came back. And he gave me really clear messages. And I know that from mediums that work with animal spirits, that when our beloved pets cross over and want to return, if they want to return, they give us really clear signs. So they tell us how they will show up, when they will show up, sometimes even what time and where they will show up. And he really told me all these details, and he really came exactly as he promised, as a tabby cat 1 year later, almost exactly at 3 p.m. It was so, you know, concrete. And he said he would be found at House of Beads, and he was found at a house or at a company that works with glass, and they create these crystal or glass beads, and that he would be brought to us. He was given to us by our neighbor, and also that he would come on full moon, autumn equinox, and that really happened. It was exactly, you know, full moon, autumn equinox at 3 p.m. that my neighbor sent me a message that they found this gray tabby cat and at her work, and if I wanted it. So sometimes, you know, they stay in touch. If they want to incarnate immediately, they stay in touch a lot, I found. And if they are like my dog Max, he didn't want to incarnate back. He just wanted to experience a different life, and he might come back again, but not yet. So we are in this different contact during my inner journeys, or during certain dreams when I inner journey, because of course we all sometimes inner journey in our dreams, but we often forget about it. And some dear ones just don't have a reason to contact us so often, because they are with our greater higher selves there in the prime reality, and so they maybe don't have a reason, and we maybe don't have a reason for that contact, because we have a different journey, or we have to focus on our journey fully. So there are different reasons, why, how, and when our beloved souls that crossed over communicate. But I always find, if you really want to connect with someone who has crossed over, if you just go into your here and now, into that inner portal, as I call it, and connect to that inner portal, to that source of your beloved, through the heart connection, through the love you share, then you will feel them. You will know that they're always with you, that they can never leave, because it's that powerful now that we are always connected in